Echo. Stop music. Echo. What time is it?
The time is 1:58 p.m.
Echo. Play NPR.
Live from NPR. Here's Marfa Public Radio.
You have been listening to All Latino from NPR Music. I'm Felix Contreras. As always, thanks for listening.
This is Double Craves and Marfa.
This is KRTS Marfa, KRTP Alpine, KDKY Marathon, KOJP Presidio, and KXWT Odessa Midland.
Are you seriously claiming that they are not under attack from Russia?
You know, I want to seriously see the evidence that these are Russians.
Are you suggesting that the shells that are flattening Ukrainian cities are being fired by Ukrainians?
The Putin regime's not backing down from its alternate reality, and that's pretty much all its citizens can see. Also, how one Russian journalist is still fighting for his readers, family, and country to grapple with the truth.
It's hard enough to have someone admit to a simple innocuous mistake like breaking a piece of china. But what I'm asking them here is to say, yes, I'm also partly responsible for this because I voted for Putin.
And what happens when a video game becomes real life in a time of war?
And those who play Tarkov are those who are on his something that Turner Hungary. And Tarkov, as it is very similar to the beginning of the war in Ukraine.
It's all coming up after this.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Windsor Johnston. Russian forces are stepping up their military campaign in western Ukraine, striking an air base near the border with Poland. NPR's Eric Westervelt reports at least 35 people were killed in the attack.
Ukraine's governor for the region says the barrage of cruise missiles also wounded 134 people at the base, less than 15 miles from the Ukraine-Poland border. Ukrainian officials here say Russia fired about 30 missiles in all from the air and sea, but claim 22 of them were intercepted by Ukraine's air defenses. The New York Times reports the base was being used to train fighters from abroad and to support arms and ammunition flowing into Ukraine from some NATO countries. NPR has not independently confirmed that. A senior Russian diplomat had warned Saturday that such sites are legitimate military targets, and in Moscow Sunday, Russia's defense ministry said such attacks will continue against what it called foreign mercenaries. Eric Westervelt, NPR News, Lviv.
The Pentagon says it stands by its decision not to enforce a no-fly zone over Ukraine. Spokesperson John Kirby told ABC's This Week that such a move could be seen as a major escalation of tensions.
The United States getting involved in combat in Ukraine right now or over the skies of Ukraine right now leads to war with Russia. And there's very little that you can see that would make sense for this war to be escalated between two nuclear powers.
Kirby says it's clear that Russia is now expanding its target sets as it becomes increasingly frustrated about the pace of the invasion. He also says Russian forces have been caught off guard by strong resistance from Ukrainian forces. The war in Ukraine has taken the life of an American journalist. Brent Renault, a photographer, was killed during fighting near the Ukrainian capital today. In a statement, Ukraine's Interior Ministry said Renault sacrificed his life to show the cruel and ruthlessness of the aggressor. The United Kingdom says it will pay its residents to take in refugees from Ukraine. Bill Marks reports the government is offering British households roughly $450 per month to provide shelter for people fleeing the Russian invasion.
The UK Housing Minister Michael Gove says citizens that registered online would be able to nominate a specific Ukrainian individual or family group to stay with them for free in return for government payments. The British homeowners could find their new house guests online, including via social media posts, and would be expected to host them for a minimum of 6 months. Gove also says authorities were considering whether to temporarily use the seized properties of Russian oligarchs to house those fleeing the conflict and expected tens of thousands to arrive. The government's political opponents have criticised efforts as being too small and too slow and responded that the latest announcement did not yet include enough practical details. For NPR News, I'm Bill Marks in London.
You're listening to NPR News in Washington. Starting Wednesday, ride-sharing company Uber says it will start charging customers a new fuel fee. The temporary surcharge comes amid rising gas prices. Uber says it will charge up to 55 cents for each Uber trip and up to 45 cents for each Uber Eats order. Officials in Kentucky are working to ensure that anyone who was affected by last year's deadly tornadoes and might be eligible for federal assistance gets registered by Monday's deadline. Karen Zard from member station WUKY has more.
The Bethlehem of Western Kentucky storm victims to apply for FEMA financial assistance for home repairs or replacements was extended to March 14th, partly because of the scope of the damage and partly due to the challenge of reaching so many displaced families. Kentucky Emergency Management Director Jeremy Slinker says this weekend is the final push to get applications completed.
Been working diligently to make sure there's not a population out there that we miss or a group that we miss.
Slinker says if someone misses the deadline, there will still be help available, but going through the FEMA process allows aid to be distributed more quickly and opens the door for more services. For NPR News, I'm Karen Zard in Mayview.
Gas prices continue to spike in the United States. The average price of regular grade gasoline has risen 79 cents over the past 2 weeks to $4.43 per gallon. You're listening to NPR News in Washington.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include West Beth Entertainment, with Professor Brian Cox's new show, Horizons, a physicist's take on the impact of humanity in the universe. Touring North America April through June. Tickets at briancox.live.
Support for Marfa Public Radio comes from Posada de Agave in Presidio, Texas, where you can stay in a 100-year-old modern adobe on your Big Bend vacation. The 1- and 2-bedroom units are recently updated and feature fine linens, the coffee bar, and a courtyard with a wood grill and fire pit. It's just off of Highway 170 in Presidio, near the heart of Big Bend and Oklahoma, Mexico. You can get details by searching the words Airbnb Posada de Agave. That's Airbnb Posada de Agave.
From WNYC in New York, this is On the Media. I'm Brooke Gladstone. The death toll mounts in Ukraine this week as diplomatic talks with its Russian invaders find no purchase. And while the United States remains at arm's length from the fight on the ground, the attack on Russian finances has picked up steam.
Thanks to Putin, his invasion of Ukraine has prompted a mass exodus of businesses from Russia, including Visa, MasterCard, and American Express, which are ceasing cardholder transactions in the country.
Banning all imports of Russian oil and gas and energy.
Big beverage is also getting into it.
Coca-Cola and Starbucks joining the growing list of American businesses no longer doing business in Russia.
And even Big Burger.
McDonald's is the big one. They're going to keep paying their employees, but they're temporarily shutting all of their McDonald's restaurants.
Behind what some are calling the new Iron Curtain, the impact of all these global wallets snapping shut is starting to pinch.
Economic war, that is how Russia is describing the barrage of Western sanctions it is now being hit with. The government has now announced tax breaks for businesses and some other financial aid. The ruble is now worth less than a cent on the dollar.
But inside the country, shuttered McDonald's and stalled Apple Pay transactions are just part of the story. The biggest part, the most tragic, the part about the war, is never told. In fact, it's dangerous even to try, so it remains effectively unseen.
The special internet filtering system was adopted recently in Russia.
Irina Boronin is a is a Russian investigative journalist and senior fellow with the Center for European Policy Analysis.
It's called Sovereign Internet. This is a very effective system of blocking and mitigating any kind of traffic in Russia. The authorities have the capacity to block any website or any particular story, and capacity to block any global platform, whether it's Facebook or YouTube.
Even when seen in action, it's hard to imagine message control at this scale and intensity. Of course, Vladimir Putin is the master of alternate realities, but his loyalists are similarly bald-faced. Take this clip of a BBC interview of former US-based spy and now member of the Russian Duma, Maria Butina.
I'm seriously claiming that they are not under attack from Russia.
You know, I want to seriously see the evidence that these are Russians. And as much as we know, and me personally in my region, we help people evacuated from Donbass. And we do have...
No, stop, please. Are you suggesting that the shells that are flattening Ukrainian cities are being fired by Ukrainians?
I hope not. I hope no one in the world can warn their own population.
The Kremlin's talking points saturate the field like the fire from a rotary cannon, and the consequences are just as dire if you stand in its way. Last month, OTM producer Molly Schwartz brought us the story of Michael Washura, an American tasked with playing the Stars and Stripes pundit on Russian state TV talk shows, a job that often shifted between pundit and punching bag.
The format is designed so that one side always wins and the other side always loses, and the side that always loses is my side.
He was the guy they talked over or shouted down, the one with the ludicrous American viewpoint on the day's issues. And in recent days, the issue was Ukraine.
The hosts talk about how the West wants to discuss the security of Ukraine, but we here in Russia are worried about our own security. Washura responds, speaking fluent Russian with a slightly Western accent.
Ваши танки и войска у границы Украины никому не угрожают.
You say that your tanks and troops around the borders of Ukraine do not threaten anyone, that they are not even there, he says, but that they are ready to answer any provocation to the end. Some of the patriotic panelists jump in, saying, so then don't provoke us. Just go to Florida and relax. There's no cause for concern.
Michael Washura did his bit, however pointless it seemed to many, for God and country and a paycheck. But soon enough, just like the open internet, fast food, and credit cards, Washura's role in Russia's reality ceased to exist.
I left Moscow at 11 p.m. February 23rd, about 7 hours before Russia's invasion of Ukraine started.
And what motivated you to do that?
For a couple of weeks before that, my wife and I had been having conversations about when we would know it was time to go. And the Monday before the Wednesday that we left, we saw Vladimir Putin give a speech. And by the end of it, we had purchased airplane tickets out of the country.
Something about what he said.
Well, not so much what he said, the way he said it. It sounded unhinged. And we weren't the only people who noticed that. We had a couple of conversations about whether or not we might be jumping the gun a little bit. And so when we left on that Wednesday, I promised that if nothing had happened by Saturday, we would buy tickets back to Moscow for Sunday, and our son would go to school on Monday as usual.
So now you're in Tbilisi, Georgia. How do you feel being in a peaceful place?
Honestly, when we got here, I noticed for the first time in a couple of months just the tension go out of my chest. I was expecting something bad to happen for a while now, and even though something bad did happen, the fact that it was happening while I was out of Moscow physically, just emotionally, it wasn't quite as difficult as it probably would have been.
Did you feel in any way like you abandoned your mission?
To some extent, yeah. I was nervous about what the personal consequences might be for me. You know, being of the regime, but still a critic. And so in late January, early February, I actually wrote a letter to my son, just in case I disappeared into a penal colony or something like that. I sent it to a friend in Chicago. I didn't want to send it to my parents.
And in that letter, I wrote about how we would know when it was time to go and whether or not we should go. Because repression really is the sincerest form of flattery. If they really thought that I was important enough that I could influence the regime, then really I sort of had a duty to stay and play that role. In the end, we decided that it just wasn't worth it. We had seen what a similar regime in Belarus did when hundreds of thousands of people came out on the street to protest. It didn't make a difference. And sadly, my conclusion about where things are going in Moscow is that no amount of people power can stop this regime from doing what it's going to do, and we left.
So what about your job? What happened?
So on Wednesday evening, when we were on our way to the airport, there had still been an invasion. I got a call from my producer saying that I would be on as usual on Thursday. I told her that I physically couldn't be there. I didn't tell her why exactly. No one knew that we were leaving. My producer covered for me. She said that she would tell the higher ups that I was feeling sick, which I was physically. And as long as nothing bad happened, I said I would be back on Monday. I haven't actually heard from her since. And if I had still been in Moscow on that Thursday, I know that my appearance would have been canceled, because since then they've taken away even any semblance of debate or freedom of speech. So even these token opposition that they would bring into the studio to be shouted over, that's gone. They're so concerned about controlling this message that in the studios it's only people who support the special military operation. It's not going to war on TV all the time.
You've been texting with one of the hosts, right? Sending them videos of what's happening in Ukraine, the atrocities?
Sure, I have a little WhatsApp chat with the most aggressive of the hosts, and I send him video evidence of things that the Russian army has done, and I remind him that the tribunal will not forget about you.
The tribunal? You mean like the Nuremberg trials?
Yeah, when this is over, there are a lot of people in Russia who will need to be brought to justice. And people who I work with are among them.
You told our reporter, Molly Schwartz, that part of what motivated you to stay at your job was an inside view into a vast influencing machine. What did that machine look like when you left, and what does it look like now?
The machine has fundamentally changed for the past 8 or so years. The machine created a kind of simulacrum of freedom of speech and debate. It gave people the impression that issues were being discussed. Now, that element has been completely erased. They feel so nervous about controlling this particular message that they can't tolerate any dissent whatsoever.
Has there been that kind of ebb and flow you've observed in the past between fake debate and no debate?
One example, in August of 2020, in Belarus there were elections which were pretty blatantly falsified. Hundreds of thousands of Belarusians came out to protest. There were violent reprisals from the Belarusian authorities. And on Monday, I was supposed to be on a block about that. And at the last minute, they called me and one other of the quote-unquote liberals because they were clearly nervous about controlling that message. Now, in that case, by the end of the week, they were having me on and accusing the CIA of organizing the whole protest movement. Things had moved back to normal.
Normal meaning that you would make your observations based on your understanding of the truth and they would talk over you.
That's right. Normal in the sense that they understood communicating the message they wanted to communicate would be more effective by having that semblance of a debate. So in the case of the Belarusian elections in 2020, that little transition from total blackout of any opposing ideas to simulacrum debate, it took about 2 days. In the case of the special military operation, that change has not happened, and I don't see any prospect for it happening.
You said on Twitter, quote, a note on individual Russians' collective blame for all of this. They deserve it, and I deserve it with them. What do you mean by that?
I mean that everybody who was part of that country, and still is to some extent in this together. The fact that I was opposed and am opposed to the regime, and my wife was also, doesn't mean that her Visa and MasterCards should not be blocked. There are collective punishments, which seem to be the only way to actually potentially influence anything that's going on inside that country. And if people who are opposed to the regime have to suffer a little bit for that, I think they deserve it, and I think I deserve that right along with them.
Later in the show, we'll be hearing from Alexei Kabalyov from Meduza. He said that he feels complicit for not trying hard enough, and that everyone who ever went on RT, Russia Today, is complicit. Do you feel complicit in that way, in playing your role in the fake debate?
To some extent, yes. Alexei is a really, really good journalist. And Alexei, I've read his work, I respect his work a lot. He's done everything that he possibly could to actually fight this regime. I think that I was doing the same thing. I understood what the game was. My hope in participating in it was that, not that I would win exactly, but that I could put myself in a position to play a positive role. That some people tuning in would see through the facade and understand how things were being rigged against characters like me and really against viewers. It didn't succeed, and I deserve some blame for that.
What about Russian society? And you've made some pretty sharp observations about its mental health.
I know this sounds extreme. I don't think it will sound extreme in 2 months. I don't see any way for that society to be healthy without foreign occupation, without international authorities mandating that free media is allowed to operate the way that free media operates everywhere that has freedom of speech, freedom of the press, that really certain politicians are not allowed to participate in political processes, demagogues are not allowed to say certain things. Without those sorts of outside controls, I don't see any way to deprogram so many of the people who I would meet on the street, who would spit back in my face all of the absurdist talking points that they heard from Federal Channel Television House. I don't see any way to create society without any outside control.
So, what's next for you? To the extent that you know,
what's next for me? I was going to some consular officers in Warsaw. I was filming for nobody before we moved back to the US. And so we are going to be exiles abroad for the foreseeable future.
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Very much. Alexei Kabalyov, satellite producer, today, the last
My grandparents were still alive up to the 90s. I don't think that we still know that the picture. I'm going to go to 2%. T-shirt patches, so what have you said? Face to face.
In April last year, police continued to find agents by the Russian government. This is why journalists and outlets to brand every piece of content with a disclaimer or else face million fines. That status
donations for viewers, which is very problematic because as of now, football has lost personality. And the problem is that Western digital services that we're learning about for cash transfers and donations, they might pay down. Let's try, for example, to learn from donations affecting Russian client service. So Russians can access we are almost exclusively relying on donations from them.
Foreign agent classification is stabilizing things, everybody. You learn how being labeled undesirable organization by the Russian state. What is classification? Certain patterns of
It's not just ourselves, basically everyone shares our content. If we cut ourselves off and figure out what we're going to be experts, just be able to judge us.
So, as of March 4th, you said you bring report about the war. Is it legal in Russia? Can you tell me how the visa has adapted?
Well, I'm very interested. So it's a huge difference of safety. further evidence that documents were sourced from Mossad contracts and just shipped off to the front line for a few months. It matches actual contracts with combat experiments to the front line. We were able to track down the parents in the front line. Yes, we do this bad, just about that. This event shows that.
On March 6th, thousands of protesters against the war were arrested in 69 cities. Is it possible to quantify the resistance at this stage?
It's boxing. I think the country of or at least we will exactly what they were facing. And massive fine, possibly 15 days of administrative arrest. The probably will still not be inside that because nobody would want anything to do with a dangerous element like someone who would go and protest this war. But we still have no way of quantifying the level of dissatisfaction because if you're a Russian and your entire media diet only consists of government-owned media, which is the majority of all media consumed in Russia, you wouldn't even know that there's a war going on. These claims that are being circulated, they're so absurd that I wouldn't even know where to begin. This rift goes right through my own family, because Russia and Ukraine are connected by millions and millions of historical and familial ties. My wife's grandmother was born in Ukraine. My father's grandfather was born in Ukraine as well. But when you confront people with these horrific images of cities like Kharkiv, which looks exactly like my neighborhood in Moscow, when I'm confronting people with these images, they will just repeat what the state propaganda is telling them, that there is no war. We were told on Channel 1, which is the biggest television network in Russia, that there is no war. We're just exterminating those Nazi elements. And if you're telling me that these are images of actual residential quarters in Kharkiv being struck by Russian missiles, it's because the Nazis are parking their artillery pieces inside residential quarters to provoke Russian artillery to fire at them and accuse Russia of war crimes. I'm not kidding you, this is an actual conversation I had.
Here is what really puzzles me. I reported from Moscow in the Yeltsin years, 92 to 95. It was only 1 year after the breakup of the Soviet Union, but people still had a kind of mindset. They had complete trust in what was said in their own group and their own family, and they feigned trust in what the government was telling them. And so I found it really surprising when I heard the stories like the one you just told, where that trust in what the family says, what the little group says, the people that you roll your eyes with, what they say, didn't dislodge the falsehoods that have been spewed on Russian television.
I see where you're going with this, and I know because I was there. I was an October's child, and I was a young pioneer. so I had let in sport break in my classroom, so I do remember the time. What's happening now is different from then because I'm asking of my, let's say, my in-laws. I'm not just asking them to confirm or deny some ideological tenet, like what is better, socialism or capitalism. I'm asking them actually to admit their complicity in a horrific war crime done in their name.
Is that how you feel yourself?
Oh, well, I've been working as a journalist for 20 years. I've been doing the same thing I'm doing now. Exposing lies and wrongdoings and corruption. And I haven't been protesting because that's not what I see my mission as a journalist. But I feel like I've been doing what I've seen as my mission as an independent journalist.
So you don't charge yourself with complicity?
I do, in fact. Maybe I should have done more. Maybe I should have spoken out more loudly. I have no idea. Yeah, I have no idea, frankly. I've never seen anything like this, and I don't think anyone has.
You say that it's not that people are simply lacking access to factual info, they outright refuse to acknowledge its existence, and you've explained why, but do you see any way to break a propaganda hold that the people themselves prefer to cling to?
Well, in 1945, the Americans organized a trip for the citizens of the city of Dachau, where one of the most notorious death camps was. So they actually put them on a bus and took them to the grounds of this concentration camp and had these people fill in the graves, the remains of the victims of this concentration camp. That's what it took for people of the city of Dachau, who had been living in the vicinity of this death camp, to acknowledge what had been happening next to their homes for the past several years.
That's a tall order here.
Yeah.
Getting boatloads of Russians into Mariupol and all the other cities.
I frankly don't know what it would take for Russians. The Germans had to come to terms over the next very painful few decades with what had been done in their name. But with Russians, it's literally relatives.
It seems like Russia's pretty far from a massive anti-war movement, but do you think the seeds have been sown?
Oh, well, I think so, yeah, because the sanctions are going to hit us pretty hard, and the ordinary Russians were really going to be sanctioned back into 1990. The shelves in the stores were empty.
I remember that well.
Yeah, and it's going to be worse than that, because in 1992 and 1995, we had the future ahead of us. Now we don't have anything. So people will be waking up to the fact our country is definitely not on the right side of history in this.
Alexei, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Alexei Kavolyov is an investigative editor at Medusa. Coming up, a celebrated Ukrainian gamer finds himself relying on his well-honed skills to save his life. This is on Media.
On Media is supported by Indeed, committed to helping businesses hire quality candidates. Indeed's instant match searches through millions of resumes to deliver candidates who fit the job description. More at Indeed.com/credit.
I'm Maria Hinojosa. This week on Latino USA, our award-winning series, The Moving Border, continues. We travel back to Mexico to join a migrant caravan and later meet asylum seekers preparing to risk their lives in the jungles of Colombia. That's this week on Latino USA.
Today at 3 here on Marshall Public Radio.
Our interview in our time at the radio track.
This program is a sensory experience. You engage with all the senses. The sounds, the color of food. It's just kind of old-fashioned and kind of a romantic in a way, and just kind of excites the little boy in me. This is Marshall Public Radio. Radio for a wide range.
This is on the media. I'm Rick Blackstone. So thus far on the show, we've heard about journalists who fled Russia because of a series of draconian anti-press laws that could have landed them behind bars for years. And now it's turn to the exodus of refugees from Ukraine, which is being described as the fastest growing displacement of people in Europe since the Second World War. Our correspondent, Michael Lowenberg, has the story of a place from war in Egypt and also celebrities.
What's the lead?
We're watching a live stream on Twitch.tv of a gamer who goes by Bobby. It's February 24th and he's talking with his viewers. Most of the screen is taken up by a video game, a first-person shooter. In the bottom left corner, you see Bobby's face. His windy eyes are picking through a glass ball of lava. Behind him is a cot, a stack of wood logs, a furnace, and concrete wall. Bobby is live streaming from a bunker 30 feet below a military base in eastern Ukraine. The flames are staring up the continuous time of the invasion starts to unfold. This is Charlotte Lyons, who goes by Lottie. He lives in Trenton, Ontario, and she's one of Bobby's most devoted friends.
And we sort of took his head up and looked around with this guy. I think I'm dead.
But at this moment, he realizes that Russia has begun bombing his location.
Will you correct me if if I can put this update the TV text on Discord?
Yeah, we got Discord. Discord is a messaging app popular among gamers.
Watching him say goodbye to everybody absolutely great. He doesn't know if he's going to make it to see his kids, much less get to see the rest of the people he's considered his
We'll see soon, though. Definitely soon. I saw this clip as it was circulating on the internet and went to Twitch to see if Bobby had signed back on. He'd been silent for 8 days. I wanted to know what had happened to him, whether he'd made it to his family, if they were all right. I managed to track him down with Lottie's help.
So, Lottie, did you share with Mike my location and stuff?
No, not your specific location.
Okay. Well, you can say that.
Before I tell you what happened, I need to get you up to speed. First off, his real name's Pavel, but everyone calls him Bobby, so that's what I call him. He's from Poland, and he asked that I smudge some of his personal details to protect his family's safety. He originally came to Ukraine to start a business 10 years ago, but in 2014, life in eastern Ukraine, where they were living, started to get really rough. Putin's invasion of Crimea accompanied a parallel conflict in the Donbass region between Ukraine and pro-Russian separatists, about 75 miles from Bobby's home. The nearby violence and economic turmoil hurt his business, and it filled him with dread. To get his mind off of things, he started sinking his free time into a game called Escape from Tarkov.
No, PMC guys, be careful, PMC.
You're dead?
I'm dead, PMC.
It's a first-person shooter game, kind of like Call of Duty, but way more hardcore.
Call of Duty, all of your teammates are marked as your teammates, and all of your enemies are marked as your enemies, and you have a special map that shows you where all your enemies are. Tarkov has none of that and very little instruction to start with. So it's got a very steep learning curve to it.
Bobby became obsessed with Escape from Tarkov for a couple reasons. First, he loved the brutal challenge. You can't just run and gun in Tarkov. You have to be tactical and deliberate. The point is to survive. The weapons are designed to sound and feel like the real thing. And if you let your guard down for a moment, you're dead.
Those who play Tarkov are those who are able to find peaceful suffering, and it takes a lot of suffering to get good enough to play the game.
And the second reason?
It clicked with me because prisons are looking like I'm used to seeing this instead of work in real life, and the story was not in the place I was living.
Tarkov is a fictional Russian war zone created by Battlestate Games, a beloved Russian developer.
Tarkov is very similar to what was the beginning of the war in Ukraine.
For instance, in the game, you can play as one of 2 private military groups, which, he says, matched the dynamic in the early days of the war in Donbass.
There were private armies formed by oligarchs in Ukraine.
I get that he really liked the game, but was he good at it?
Yeah, 18,000 hours.
Holy crap. 18,000 hours is 2 years.
I was doing all the things I was doing. I was like a zombie, putting Tarkov on the only drug to keep me out from having any contact with reality.
When I think of an escape, I think of going to some fantasy land that's so unlike real life that it gets your mind off of it. But this sounds like you were just escaping into a computerized, gamified version of the world directly around you.
In real life, majority of things are really taken away from your hands, if you like it or not. In Tarkov, the majority of your outcome depends on you.
He felt that lack of real-world agency when COVID hit Ukraine. His business, all his investments he'd spent 8 years building, vanished overnight. He remembers telling his Tarkov friends about it in early 2020.
Husband, guys, I'm bankrupt. I have family, wife, 2 daughters, and I don't know what to do, how to live. And the best thing I have left under my name is my life insurance. How I can commit suicide. They told me, don't panic. Why don't you just do what you do right now, but for reading? And then they asked me straight, why don't you just stream Tarkov?
So he set up an account on Twitch. His wife used the connection she had in the army to help him rent a cheap bunker on a military base 18 miles from his home, which would allow him to stream without bothering his family. He also launched Tarkov Academy, a website where 40 or so people would end up applying to be coached by Bobby. The service was promotional and therefore free, but you have to put up with this.
While you are looking the stats, while I'm disconnected next to you, I'll die instantly. Do you understand what means protect me?
What the heck is do you need to be told, Sansa? I told you, protect me. Many people were saying I was taking Tarkov too seriously, but for them it was just a game. For me, it was a source of feeling and family, so every time I die, I'd think I'd take a piece of bread from mouth of my children and wife.
The very first time I saw it, I didn't understand it.
This is Keith Bodner, a 41-year-old operations manager living in the UK. He goes by Keithy.
He's a very intense person when he's in the game, and he's very focused. And because he knows every aspect of the game intricately, I honestly thought this guy's crazy.
Eventually, Keithy and Lottie became two of his biggest fans.
Keithy is Bobby's right-hand man. They have been teaming together and working on the Tarkov Academy program together for years.
Before the invasion, Bobby's stream averaged about 40 viewers. Super tiny by Twitch standards. He made $500 a month through donations and Twitch ads, which was enough for his family to live a humble but stable life. And a big part of the reason this operation worked was because of volunteers like Lottie and Keithy.
My responsibilities were to make sure that the Discord was running smoothly and then moderating the stream.
How many hours a week would you say you were moderating?
In the region of 50 hours.
Why were you giving this person, I'm assuming you've never met in real life, 50 hours a week of free labor?
It's hard to explain, but basically you fall in love with Bob. You spend a little bit of time with him and everybody says the same. He's infectious.
Bobby takes everybody in who's kind and genuine, and he makes them a part of his family. Calls them brother and he calls me sister, and that makes a very loyal following.
Which brings us back to February 24th, just before 6 a.m. Ukraine time.
Wish you good luck, brother.
He ends the stream, rushes out of the military base. The air raid sirens are blaring, and he begins his drive back to his family.
About 35 minutes after he left the bunker, he saw a missile go over his head that we're pretty sure destroyed his bunker. We know it hit it.
He starts dictating his will into his phone, which he sends to Keithy in a series of audio messages.
There's missiles literally going over his head. He's feeling them landing. He explained what he believed was PTSD at that stage due to the vibration and impact that it was having on his body.
How did you respond to that?
I had to be brutal to him to calm him down. I couldn't reach across the phone and slap him across the face. I told him to pull himself together, that he's got kids that need him and he needs to think on his feet and he needs a plan to get there. It was like, I know, Keithy, I needed you to tell me. And then as soon as he snapped out of that, his training kicked in.
His training?
He spent 18,000 hours playing effectively the most realistic Russian military simulator.
Over the next 4 days or so, Bobby traveled over 900 miles as he navigated his way towards Ukraine's western border. To survive, he says he drew on 3 lessons that he learned from playing Escape from Tarkov. Lesson 1, think, don't run.
You want to run anywhere, even if you where you run, you're just trying to run away, and as you understand, your direction of the movement is determining whether you feel alive or not.
When he played Tarkov, he was always the party leader, the one who called the shots.
Every arm in the world, they have a drill sergeant.
He says he barked orders at his family to keep everyone from panicking during the overwhelming stress of shelling around them.
Those people shouting out then to get upset with you, to get irritated, the feeling around the 12 to do what I'm saying. So
a quick note, Bobby has 2 partners, one Polish, one Ukrainian. Each is mother to 1 daughter. He calls them his wives, but
Alexa.
these are not legal marriages.
Echo.
The backstory...
Stop. Echo, what time is it?
The time is 2:48 p.m.
Echo, what's the weather?
Interlingua, there's a fire weather watch in effect Monday, March 14th from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. The current weather is 71 degrees Fahrenheit with clear skies and sun. Throughout the day, you can expect more of the same, with a high of 76 degrees and a low of 43 degrees.
Echo, tell me a joke.
How do you know you're in love with a robot? You feel a little spark.
Echo, what's the weather going to be next week?
Weather alert for Tallulah. There's a fire weather watch in effect Monday, March 14th from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. The forecast for the next 7 days. Monday, 79 degrees Fahrenheit and lots of sun. Tuesday, 77 degrees and lots of sun. Wednesday, 86 degrees and lots of sun. Thursday, 82 degrees and lots of sun. Friday, 79 degrees and mostly sunny weather. Saturday, 86 degrees and lots of sun. Sunday, 90 degrees and mostly sunny weather.
Echo, green on.
Okay.
Echo, green off.
Okay.
Well, I think that's about it for this live stream. Gonna go mobile here. We'll see how far we get. Hey, Molly. Hey, Molly. Where are we going, Molly? Where are we going? Where are we going? Nut. You're a nut. Well, Molly says adios. Bye, Molly.